the sense of failure, right? Why can't my body do that one simple thing? Like as a woman in history, the one thing all these women have done.
Yes.
Otherwise we wouldn't be. Why can't I do it?
And I also feel like having somewhat more knowledge in the medical field, I felt more of a failure. Like, how did I not catch this? Like, that also made it like, my body should have known because you studied it. Like, body, you knew this.
Welcome to 9+9, the Honest Birthing and Pregnancy podcast, where we talk every week about the amazing and sometimes also heartbreaking journey of making a human and bringing a human into this world. And this week on my couch is joining me Rani, who is a dentist and also a mother of a beautiful boy, who is going to share her story, which is, I think, one of the more toughest stories in this podcast so far. So I would like to give a trigger warning here. If you suffer from depression or you have recently gone through the loss of a baby, because that's going to be the topic of this episode, and you do not feel like listening to this, please turn off. We'll have more episodes which are on different things, and you can just skip this one. If this is of interest for you, if you have somebody who's been through this, or if you yourself have been through this, we hope this episode will help you understand and relate and cope with your situation. So welcome, Rani.
Hi.
Because it came as such a surprise to you,
Yeah.
it would be interesting. Like, usually you would assume that if there is any medical issue with the baby, you're sort of prepared before giving birth, or you're prepared during the pregnancy that something might happen.
Yeah.
But for you, your pregnancy seemed like a breeze, like not very like complicated, fine. You were fine during your pregnancy, no?
Mm-hmm.
And then
It's fine. I wasn't very old. I was 31, I think, when I was pregnant. So, like, you're not high risk, no significant past medical history. I have PCOS, so I had a little bit of a difficult time getting pregnant, but I wouldn't say in the grand scheme of things it took all that long. It took 6 months, which is not as long as what many other women face. And my pregnancy was absolutely fine. Like, everything's progressing normally. I have always been I was a smaller baby, so we knew that the baby might also be a little bit of a smaller baby.
even your husband is tall.
Yeah, but even when he was born, he wasn't like a 12-pound. He was like maybe 7 pounds.
Okay, that
Like,
gives
so
hope
small.
when you have a small baby that they can still become such a tall grown man.
Exactly. But yeah, and then come to like my third trimester at 36, 37 weeks. They said that, maybe the baby's not growing as well, but still okay, because an ultrasound at the end of the day is two-dimensional. And I feel like it happens a lot, that they're like, looking at your past medical history, looking at all these other things, like, it looks like you're okay. Your basic blood work is fine, no one's going in depth at that point. So then you cut to like 37 weeks, or before that, so a couple of days before that, I'd gone in on a Thursday for a routine ultrasound. Everything looked okay. And then that was a Thursday. So that Monday, I can't even remember the actual second or like the time that it happened, but I just remember all of a sudden I got super dizzy. I had like auras, and I went in through, at the time, I did not know this, but what I went through was continuous contraction. So I had so much pain extending from my back to the uterus up in the front. And I had no idea what it was, but I knew, like, I couldn't feel my baby move.
And it just started all of a sudden?
All of a sudden, I think I was feeling a little uneasy. I remember I had gone for thinking that it's going to happen soon. I was like in my 36-week mark, and I went quickly to go take a shower. And in the shower, I got so dizzy. I had to hold on to things. I went into my room. Luckily, my mom was there, and I was like, "You have to call the hospital. You have to call the doctor. You have to call the hospital. You got to call someone, because something's wrong." And I just felt like this continuous pain, thinking, and first-time pregnancy, you don't know what a contraction is. You read about it, you hear about it, you talk to all your friends. You really have no idea until you feel it. Like, okay, you contract and then you relax. There's contraction and relaxation. That there's this feeling that you have. But at that time, I didn't know what it was. I was like, maybe I'm in labor. Maybe this is kind of a contraction. But this is so painful, and I can't stand up.
But that's what contractions are like. But towards
Yeah.
the end, usually,
towards
like
the
not
end.
like your first contraction is not to the point that you just faint and like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we called the hospital, and I remember the hospital, the doctors there were like, "Oh, how far along, and how far are the contractions?" And I'm like, "I can't answer that. I don't know, but I know that I can't feel my baby anymore." So we rushed to the hospital, and then they did an ultrasound right away, and they saw that there was no heartbeat. So like, right from then, I was just like, like everything just drops. Like, it's like your entire life just freezes. Like, you're just, oh my God. My husband wasn't here. He was in India at the time working, so he wasn't there. And that call was like one of the hardest calls I've ever had to make. Like,
You called him?
Yes, I called him. I had to call him and I'd be like, oh, like, there's no heartbeat. And I think he was confused. He's like, what's going on? And then he spoke to, I want to say my sister maybe, and she kind of filled him in more. But that was all I was able to say. And then I basically had gone into a shock from that day till the next evening when I was able to deliver.
But you were in labor pain all throughout?
I was in labor pain all throughout. They gave me pain meds, which normally they can't give you if you had a baby.
Yeah, because
who's
once
alive.
you know that the baby's not alive,
Yeah.
why would you go through all that pain? Like, why would they put you through this tremendous, unbearable pain?
So what had happened was the placenta basically came off of the uterine lining. So the placenta is like that. That's your main crux of blood, nutrient, oxygen transfer to the baby. So what had happened was at home, that placenta somehow abrupted, and it was positioned higher, I believe, that the baby's head held the placenta in place. So I wasn't bleeding out, luckily.
So the baby saved your life?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, he saved my life. And so what had happened then was my body went through something called a DIC, which is my blood clotting ability kind of went all haywire. I was bleeding, my body was clotting blood, they didn't know what it was doing. I couldn't get an epidural, so I couldn't get a C-section because of risk of blood clots.
Wait, so blood clots, but usually is when your blood stops bleeding, right?
Yeah, that's when your blood stops bleeding. So the reason behind the abruption was my body was attacking the placenta, and I had a very high anti-nuclear antibody and a very low protein S, which both together doesn't help your bleeding pathways. Like your body it gets confused. It uses up all the clotting factors, so you end up bleeding, and there's clots happening in places that shouldn't be happening. So it's just
so like you could have a heart attack or something while this is happening.
Yeah, and that blood clot can go affect your kidneys. It could affect anything. It's basically like when you go into something like this, you have to treat that underlying cause. Like, there's no way you can treat what's happening. You have to fix what's happening. So the only thing they could do at the time was just try to get me to deliver. But it took a long time because my body wasn't ready to deliver. So I think I walked in on the morning or in the afternoon of the 10th, September 10th, and then the next evening, September 11th evening, is when I was finally able to deliver. And I remember because I went and I was like, can I get an epidural? Like, no, you can't do this because risk of paralysis. Like, at the time there, it was just like, we need you to be healthy. We also want to do it so we don't ruin your uterus so you can have a baby again. So then I delivered, and then I had a lot of blood loss. And then it was just blood in, blood out, blood in, blood out. But all that stuff is quite hazy for me at this point.
Because they hopefully drugged you up with something. I mean,
yeah,
I can't imagine going through this pain when you know that, like, when you're in labor, you go through the pain, you're like, okay, I'm doing this, soon it'll be over, the baby will come out, and like, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
But at this point, you already knew that this is sort of, why are you even doing it?
Can't you do a C-section? Can't you do a C-section? But they're like, because they couldn't give me an epidural, and because of like the bleeding issues that I was having, they were like, we can't. Like, there's high risk of paralysis, there's high risk of this problem, there's high risk of that problem. We just can't do it. So it's like, okay. Like, And the thing is that your body doesn't know what happened. Your body thinks, hey, you're going to deliver a baby. So, after you deliver a baby, you have like this rush of like those happy hormones and you feel good. So that's exactly what happened. After I delivered, I still got that rush. So I'm like, okay, I was like, okay, I can deal with this. I can handle this. But I think it was after that. And this was at a time where my husband wasn't here still, because this was when I called him, it was night here, night in India. And he was able to fly out the following night. So he was able to come after I delivered. So this was 2 days-ish later, 2 days later.
All this time about your husband.
Yeah.
Also. But your mom was there?
My mom, my dad, my sister, my aunt who's a retired anesthesiologist. There were a lot of people there. And luckily it wasn't COVID time, so a lot of people were there. But yeah, then, and he knew what happened to the baby, but mind you, he had no idea what happened to me. So I was also in the ICU for a few days after that because of the blood loss. So when he landed, my uncle went to pick him up, and he's like, oh, somehow he had said that, oh, she's in the ICU. And he's like, what? So there was a lot of that.
For him, it must have been such a shock.
It was such a shock. I think the whole, your wife's in the ICU was a big shock.
Yeah, because he had at least the journey in the airplane to come to terms with the fact that his baby was no more, and what else do you do in the airplane? So I would assume he had time to process this, but then thinking that he would be able to be with you and support you and be close to you. But if you're in the ICU, you can't even be close to somebody.
Exactly. I think he came in like tubes in and whatnot. After I delivered, because my placenta had come out in pieces, and I believe my uterus was still in contraction, so they had to put a balloon inside to help it kind of relax and basically stop the bleeding. All of that stuff had to happen, and then so when he saw me, I was in the ICU. Everything was well and out, but the actual mourning for the baby happened after that. Okay, what happened to you? What's going on? And then
did he get to see the baby?
Yes.
Did you get to see the baby?
Yes. So right when I delivered, I got to hold him, and then they took him. I believe they took pictures, the whole thing. And then after he came, and I think a few hours after he got settled, they brought the baby out again. So yeah, that was needed. I think just close out that chapter. But yeah, and then they give you a remembrance box, if you would like to take a remembrance box home or not.
And what's in there?
So after the baby's born, they put the hat on. I just remember the hat. And I'm sure there's other things, maybe a certificate of some sort. I don't know, because we didn't end up taking the box home.
Okay. Because it was easier for you to just close that chapter.
I think it was just, it was a lot. I don't think I even fully understood. And then, then you're in the hospital for a week, and then you just you're okay, I'm done. I want to go home.
Do you get psychological counseling when this happens to you?
Yes, there was somebody that came and spoke to us.
Because I would assume you're under drugs anyways. So and your hormones are off. So whatever you say, you can't even take that and how truthful is that to your real state, because you're filled with painkillers and some other stuff. So even if I'm asking you, are you fine? You'll be like, yeah, I'm fine, I'll manage. And you probably only when you come home and you're off all the meds
is when you feel it.
Yeah.
Because it's not that. It's when you come home, you see bits and pieces of things that you've bought, or these hopes that you had when you came home, and you're like, oh my God, this is not real.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, there wasn't. During the hospital stay, there obviously were people that came back and forth, but after that, there wasn't much of any sort of counseling or checkup. I think I was supposed to go see my OB-GYN 2 weeks later.
For medical reasons.
For medical reasons, to check. And then they're also what, obviously doctors are also perplexed, what happened? This is huge, what happened? It wasn't just
doctors are perplexed. They shouldn't be perplexed, right? It's yeah, why would I know what happened?
What happened?
Yeah.
And then, 2 weeks later, my body was back to normal. I didn't have high ANA or this or this or that. I didn't have any like autoimmune issues happening.
Did
And
your
it was
milk
like
come in?
my milk came in, I think about 2 weeks or so later, which I didn't even think about because like nobody really told me like, oh, this is what's gonna happen.
And also because you think a lot of women who don't do the skin to skin immediately, they have breastfeeding issues. So you would think if you never do that, then it might just not come in.
Yeah, and again, like you read about it, all this stuff prior to, but you don't exactly think that if you don't have a baby, that milk's not going to come in. No, the milk came in. The milk came in, but it went away very quickly. I think in like under a week's time. The thing that I remember most was I remember getting a really bad UTI 2 weeks later. Like it was pain. I remember being in painful, and then like the next 5 hours, I was just like bleeding, bleeding. My urine was blood. It was very bloody. So I went back to the doctor.
Scary, no?
Yeah, that was really scary. But I mean, I now in hindsight should have realized that that is something that would happen because I did have a catheter placed in at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously, if you did have a catheter, like high chance of having a UTI.
But not everybody is a doctor. Like,
yeah, I
would
know.
you know?
And at that time,
like
I was
you would know. All right,
Yeah.
fine. But like normal people,
yeah, exactly.
like us, you wouldn't know. And then there's also, I mean, there's a mortal risk, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think you were really lucky that the baby sort of held your placenta up, so you
Yes.
didn't bleed out on the shower.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't also react so much, especially in a shower when there's so much water and you're bleeding. Blood looks much more than it actually is. So
Yeah.
taking that responsibly and like calling the ambulance and everything, like so much could have gone wrong. Like you could have
Exactly.
died on the spot. So if I would bleed blood, if I would like pee blood, I would probably be scared for my life if I
Yes.
would be in your position.
It was. I remember, and I think it was just like I don't want to go back to the hospital. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to be anywhere near there. Like I remember because it started happening. It was a night. Like my OB-GYN, the clinic was shut. So like go to the hospital. Obviously, right? Like go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I don't want to go.
Not
to
the same hospital
I
you could
can't go to the hospital anymore. But luckily, my like family physician was able to see me really quick. So he was able to give the antibiotics, and luckily, everything was fine after that. But yeah, no one talks about the after part. No one talks about like going to your OB-GYN after having a loss. Like you're in a room. And, ultrasounds are on everywhere. You're hearing heartbeats. You're seeing people pregnant. I remember I couldn't see anybody pregnant. Like, I just physically couldn't see. I went to a dental conference right after, like a month or 2 months after. I don't even want to say right after. And there was one girl who was, like, she must be in her 3rd trimester pregnant. And I just looked down and I just ran out of the conference. I was like, okay, I can't do it. So it was more of like all that after stuff and like all the stages of grief that you kind of go through that you don't think, like initially when it's happening, you just don't think you're ever going to see the light. And then you do. And I think for me after that, it was also a very tunnel vision. Like I want to get pregnant, I'm going to get pregnant, I'm going to get pregnant. And that's the only thing that kind of kept me going. Because like after that, I think 6-7 months later, I got pregnant. Probably shouldn't have given my body a little bit more healing time.
But you felt 2 weeks later that your body was back to normal. So obviously 7 months
Yeah.
feels like a really long time.
And the doctor said like 3-4 months, you technically can try again.
Yeah.
Because your body, like I said, your body is absolutely back to normal because your body thinks it delivered a baby. It doesn't know any of the other stuff that's happened. So 6 months again, I got pregnant and then I miscarried. I must have miscarried at 8 weeks and I found out at 10 weeks.
You found out at 10 weeks. So
I found out at 10
2
weeks.
weeks you had a baby inside.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The body was not ready to let go. So then right after that obviously we didn't wait. I had a DNC, which is basically they go in and they remove.
But how did you know that there was 2 weeks between the baby passing, or the embryo basically?
So basically the doctor, like the tech, because they measured how big, right? So it wasn't at the 10-week mark, it was closer to the 8-9-week mark. And it was instant, like I have morning sickness, and then I didn't have morning sickness, right? I felt like it was quite instant, that I was like, something doesn't seem right. Because all of a sudden because 8 weeks is like when you start feeling sick.
Yeah, when you're feeling, I mean, some people feel sick the moment they get pregnant.
Yes. But like for me, it was around like 6-8 weeks, at least with the first. So then I was like, okay. and then 10 weeks. And then, but the doctors may come back and be like, every pregnancy is a little different.
Yeah, be happy that you're not morning sickness anymore.
Yeah.
Like some people are just sick for like a week. Great, good for you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think I realized for me that no, my morning sickness, that was great. So when I got, but so sorry, let me move back. When I miscarried, that was really tough for my body because I felt like it took a long time to get pregnant again after that. It took about a year and a half or a year, like over a year, maybe closer to 2, something like that, to get pregnant again. Because I think that really messed up the entire system.
Yeah, your hormones and everything.
Because it wasn't natural, right?
It wasn't natural.
It wasn't, right? Because the doctors went in and removed everything. And so all of a sudden your hormones dropped. Like you're pregnant and now like 20 minutes later you're not.
Yeah, it's not like a slow release.
Yeah.
It's a sudden scraping out. But it's important to scrape out all the material because otherwise
It
would build up inside of you, right? And then when you are pregnant again, it might create problems with the fetus.
I think what happens is that your body eventually will realize that you're no longer pregnant and will push that fertile tissue out, or the fetus out. But the problem is like the amount of bleeding you'll have. And since I've already had bleeding complications, the doctor's like, this didn't feel humane to be like, okay, you have the option of doing it naturally. Because you do have that option. It's not necessary that you have to go through like a surgery to remove the tissue. But they were like,
I've actually heard of everyone who's had a miscarriage that they all the gynecologists are like, you better like get it all removed because you don't know what it'll lead to later.
Yeah, because if it doesn't fully remove, you'll have to go in anyway. So why not just go in, clean out the space, and move on. So because of everything that happened when I did finally get pregnant with now my 4-year-old son, there was a lot of precautions put into place, like a whole lot. So much medication, a lot of
But did you take
visits.
medication then already before your 10th week? Because the previous miscarriage happened like at 8 weeks. So the moment you found out that you're pregnant, like that very day, were you like, okay, I'm going to take medicines right now because I don't even want to be like unsure during the first trimester?
So basically they had to check a viability. So I think they do wait for the heartbeat, so 6 weeks. And after that, then you can take, I was on aspirin or Ecosprin, and I was on a low molecular weight heparin, which is
what is heparin used for?
blood thinner.
But aspirin is also blood thinner.
Yeah,
so
so they both work together. Yes, normally they both work together. So daily injections, I think from 6 weeks onwards. I was also given steroids. Now there's some there's a school of thought that is like, well, steroids cross blood-brain barrier, so they can affect the baby. While the injections, the heparin, it doesn't cross, so they know that's quite safe. So it stays in the mother's blood system, and it doesn't cross over to the baby, while a steroid does. But I was also given steroids.
What could steroids do potentially to the baby? If you say it goes into the brain, like could it?
So more than that, I think it can cause like low birth weight. It can cause, I know it can cause clefting, cleft palate, cleft lip. It can cause all this. Now we don't know. 100%.
But I mean, clefting is easy to fix, and low birth weight. Even your husband had low birth, wasn't.
Well, I had lower birth weight. He didn't have low birth weight. I did when I was born, but
those are not very serious things. Like I mean,
Yes.
those are things you could deal with as long as it's not impacting like their general growth or their mental ability.
Yes.
Or
so that's what I
limbs.
was told. That these things that are things that could happen, So the doctors gave the steroid, they gave the injections, they gave the aspirin. Along with that, I was still taking that off-label use diabetic medicine to also make sure that everything's good. And I continued that for my entire pregnancy up until 30-ish weeks. I was in India for the chunk of my pregnancy, and then I went back home to deliver, which is the US. And so right before that, I was taken off the steroid because in the US they don't give the steroid, and in India they do give steroid. Just two different schools of thought.
But what would have happened if you would have not taken the steroids?
I don't know. In hindsight, I don't know. I don't know if that was what really helped me, like, have a relatively healthy pregnancy, or it did kind of help, but it didn't. I don't know. Like when my son was born, he was low, like he had a low birth weight. I don't know, and we don't know like futuristic repercussions if there are any. All the doctors say it's now done and over with. There aren't, but we don't know. I feel like maternal and fetal medicine is the least research field, because the only way to properly research that field is to basically be invasive when you're pregnant, and no one's going to do that. You're never going to risk. It's one thing to risk your life, it's another thing to risk like a baby's life, so another life. So I feel like the research is just not 100% there. I remember when I went to see my doctor for when I was pregnant with my my now baby and my now son. She said that all of this, the injections, the aspirin, all of this stuff is fairly new research. Like the fact that I'm able to give you this is amazing, because it's you know, in the grand scheme of medicine, it's fairly recent. And that was mind-boggling to me, because I mean, there's so many people, you know, years back that would have died because of pregnancy complications, because of bleeding loss. And anytime you do get pregnant, you are putting your body at harm. The mom does, right? Like, she's at risk.
And even now, your doctors are like, "How did this happen?"
Yeah.
So like, even now, you're like, okay, apparently there's not enough research. If they are asking you as a patient, how did this even happen?
Yeah.
I think that's quite scary.
It is. And mind you, this is a 0.1%, 0.0. Like, this to this level of what happened to me, it's not common at all.
Yeah.
But the fact that your placenta doesn't work very well towards the end of the pregnancy, that seems to be something I'm hearing from a lot of women. Like, oh, we had to deliver a little bit earlier. The baby wasn't growing. We have to deliver at this time because the baby, we're not quite sure, but it feels like the baby wasn't growing. Whatever it is, like, I feel like there is a lot of research that should be done on that placenta, because
so they didn't realize that there was anything wrong with your placenta. So it was all of a sudden that, like, with your first baby, that it ruptured. Like, so was that building up because it was like attacking it constantly, or was it just like a sudden thing that happened?
It was building up. That's what they said. Like, it was definitely building up. And the thing is, why you can't really see it in an ultrasound is because it's just an increase of blood flow. So if you have blood clots happening in that placenta, it's blood at the end of the day. It's not like, oh, there's like this foreign body and it looks very different from the rest of the imaging. No, it's blood. So it's like an increase. My placenta must have been more thickened, is what I'm assuming. But you can't really see that.
You can't tell because you're not seeing it from that angle. You're seeing it from the front angle.
And they decide on when to deliver emergency or not based on how the baby's doing, if the baby's growing. That is such a huge indicator of how, is the baby growing? Are you growing? Especially towards that last trimester, the mom should also gain some weight. The baby should be gaining a lot of weight or growing, or, all that kind of stuff.
But then if you have no pre-history and you're also fairly young, like 31 is like a normal age to be pregnant or have a baby right now. It's like, it feels like there's no need. Like, I remember when I went to the gynae, actually both my kids, I went to the ultrasound, and this ultrasound guy was like a different person than from my actual gynae. And he's looking and he's like, "Why is the baby so small?"
Oh, God.
And I'm like, yeah, look at me, look at my husband. Like, it's like sort of a no-brainer. Why would the baby be big? But then now in hindsight, when I talk to you, I'm like, yeah, like, he was asking from a medical perspective, like, why is the baby not growing? Why is it so small? For me, it was like a ridiculous question to ask. Like, why are you asking this question? Like, well, I'm glad to not deliver a big baby. I bloody well hope this baby stays small, because I don't have to press it out of my vagina. It's like 7 pounds.
Exactly.
But obviously, from a medical perspective, that's something to be like careful of. And then why is he asking me as a non-medical person?
He shouldn't be asking you, because we're already so stressed. Like, like, is the baby okay? Is the baby okay? And then to kind of like ask you that question, you're just like, I don't know.
Is this something to be worried about? Like, I didn't even know that's something to be worried about until I spoke to you and you told me that, like, this is an indicator. Like, the baby's not growing, that's like a problem.
Yes. If the baby, but that's the thing, that's why they have to do multiple checks, because what if they didn't see it at that point, or they did? Like, at least in the pregnancy where I was taking all this medication for, I was seeing the OB-GYN. I was seeing a high-risk doctor as well. So in 1 week, I was seeing my OB-GYN like twice and the high-risk doctor once. Like, I had that kind of care. Like, it was a
good
lot
luck. You
of
have
care.
good insurance.
It was like a lot of care. I think at that time it was just very like, what is happening? So I didn't see my OB-GYN. I went in to see the technicians as well. So like it did kind of work out with the insurance. It wasn't like his fees. The high risk is something that comes into play when you're so close.
So high risk doctor only takes care of women in their last trimester who are on a risk pregnancy.
So yeah, so if you have any form of high risk, normally they see you. So I believe in New Jersey, how it works is that they see you depending on your risks and what your OB-GYN says. Like, your OB-GYN is your main doctor. Kind of like when you see a general physician, he's your main doctor, and then you kind of reach out to specialists, but he's like that main person that kind of loops everyone in. So that's what this is. You have your OB-GYN, and your OB-GYN is the one who delivers. High-risk doctor doesn't deliver. But they do see, they have better imaging, they have more, I guess, education, and anything that's high risk, anything that like would need immediate attention, they find the littlest things. So I was induced, which basically it's a vaginal prostaglandin. It softens your cervix, so your cervix gets soft and starts opening, and then they put a balloon.
It's like a pill that they put inside.
It's a pill that they put inside to soften everything up. Then they put a little balloon in, which kind of like pushes on the cervix to open about 5 centimeters, and then they remove that, and then it happened very quickly after that.
Yeah, the first 5 centimeters are the most painful part of it.
Yeah, but this time I had the epidural. This time I was like, and it was so funny because my OB-GYN was like, you know what? Because I was like, I don't know if I need an epidural. You know, I did it without the first time. He's like, you know, you don't need to be a hero. Take the epidural. Take it early, then you can have it. You'll be a little bit more comfortable. I think he was also like fearful about the mental state and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You be comfortable. You don't need to be a hero. So
it's also a mental thing, right? Like if you get stressed, then your contractions are affected. Then the blood pressure rises. It's also bad for the baby. So if you're chill, that's sort of important, like mentally.
It is, yeah.
Relaxed.
I think like for me. But it was so different, you know, like Mika that time, like when I walked in, it was just so, like when he walked in, he came in, he had like a coffee in his hand, like obviously not near me. He had a coffee in his hand, he put it down. Just such a relaxed atmosphere. And I'm just like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be like. These are what contractions are supposed to be like. This is what it means to contract and relax, contract and relax. This is how you time it. I get it. Because I did not know that before. Like, I did not know what a contraction felt like because it was like a continuous state of being contracted before. So it was just like pain.
No release.
There's no release. And then, it is tougher to deliver, I think, with an epidural because you don't feel anything. You don't feel that contraction and release. But it was very different that time around.
Yeah, because if you don't feel it, then like the nurse holds their hand on your stomach and feels like the muscles tightening and relaxing, right? And then they tell you when to push.
You're also hooked up to the monitor, so you can also guess. Like at the time, like my husband was there, like my dad, and this is right. So this is COVID is starting to happen.
I mean, I love that your husband and your dad are there while you're delivering a baby.
They're not there when I'm delivering
like,
a baby.
Wow, my
they were
dad.
there when I first got admitted.
Delivery room. Wow.
My dad wasn't there when I delivered. They were all, like my mom, my dad, and my husband were there when I was admitted, first admitted. Right. And when they hook you up to the monitor, you can see the contraction and fall. So they were both like, oh my God, you're getting a contraction, you're getting a contraction. I'm like, okay, guys, I feel it, I know. So that, and then my parents had gone home. My obviously husband stayed back, and then the next morning, they're like, you know, come to the hospital. Like my husband called my parents, and like, you know, she's gonna deliver soon. But by the time they came, baby was out, happy, healthy baby. Smaller, birth weight was still smaller, but okay, still healthy. So that also could have been affected by the steroid. You don't know.
That he was smaller.
Yeah.
So when you delivered, they kept like blood bags there, or what did they like? Were you also at risk of bleeding out when you?
The first time around for me, like luckily it was just blood bank gave, and you're in the ICU, so everything you're highly, highly, highly monitored. So in, out, in, out. But I think it was like right when I delivered, there was so much blood loss that they were like very quickly giving me blood. And that, I think it was a labor and delivery room, I want to say, but it was a very large room, I remember. There were some 20 nurses in that room. I kid you not, there were so many people, so many medical professionals in that room.
But other people were also giving birth, or you're the only
No,
one?
I was the only one in this room, and there were like 20 nurses. There was my doctor. I remember waking up somewhere in the middle, maybe right after the delivery had happened. I can't remember. And he was like literally sitting on the side with his like head in his hand, like this is crazy. Like, I know this is going to be a case that they're going to talk about the next rounds, you know, like it was big. I just remember all these nurses being in that room, like, and I'm just like, oh my God, what's going on? And I remember like I was in and out, like every time I came back, they were like, do you know who you are? Do you know where you are? Do you know what happened? A lot of those questions were happening, and I'm like, yes, I know where I am. Yes, I know what happened. But there was a shock. Obviously, you go through this shock, so you don't fully know, you're fully aware. And to be honest, until the baby doesn't come out, you still think maybe they were wrong. Maybe everybody was wrong, you know, and he's going to be alive. So once that baby comes out and then they give him to you, it's like, finally you get that, like, okay, like, this is it. This is the end. So I think the way they do everything, like in hindsight, when you come back, you kind of be like, okay, I get it. Like, I get how they did it and why they did it. And, you know, you do ask yourself, like, what if I did this differently? What if I did that differently? But I don't think, like, had I was able to deliver my first before any of this happened, I would have never known that I have this issue.
That's true. But do you think being a doctor has helped you cope with this? Like, that you could just look at it sort of objectively from a medical perspective, be like, okay, let's look at Rani as a patient, what happened to her, and then sort of objectively, practically put it into perspective for yourself, detached from the emotional grief that you felt? Or like,
I think when everything was happening and when they're like shouting out terms like DIC, extremely low platelet count, all that kind of stuff, I think that didn't help me, because I was freaking out, like, oh my God, am I gonna die? Right? Because like you hear these terms and you get scared because you understand everything that's happening too. But I think after the fact and many months later, I feel like I can like kind of look at it as like, oh my God, this has happened. This is the reasoning behind it. I think I have a little bit more understanding as to the why that this could happen. But I do think it's like now this happened in 2017 and it's 2025, so many years later. But even sitting there talking about it, it's like it all comes back.
of course, yeah.
I think initially it was a lot easier to maybe talk about, because that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to just talk about him and celebrate him. And after so many years, like, I think the grief, it doesn't go away, but it does get like, it stays in a corner and everything else builds up around it. But then, yeah, I feel.
What did you do to combat that grief? Like, is there anything for like people who listen to this who've been through a similar experience, something that you say really helped you? Like, did you see a psychologist, or did you just tell everyone about it? Like, how did you cope with it?
I had a hard time coping with it. I did not see a psychologist, and I think I should have saw some form of therapist. I feel like aftercare in either countries that I was in, I think it could have been much better in terms of the mental health afterwards. What helped me was a gratitude journal. For some reason, that just worked for me, like every day. Some days it was like multiple times a day. Because what happens is that you go through these stages, right? You're first very angry, then you're like very upset, and then you don't feel like you're ever going to reach a phase where you're like, like that you'll have so much respect for your body. Because initially you're pissed. You're pissed at your body. Like, why can't you do the simple thing that everybody does? So I think getting from that place to being like, oh my God, you did a lot. You know, like your body, you did a lot and you healed. And, you know, luckily I was able to get pregnant again, because there are a lot of women that can't. So like just being able to go from there to there, that was big. I think what helped me the most was a gratitude journal. I was also lucky enough to, my cousin at the time was able to introduce me to somebody else that had gone through something, the same thing, except she had lost her baby. She had lost her baby I think it was second trimester. It was earlier. So she didn't go through like the extremes post, like the blood loss and all that. But I mean, she did lose her baby, and towards the end of her second trimester. And I think it was like a number of years back. So at the time, she also had maybe two babies. She had two. Yeah, she had perspective. She also had given birth to one or two babies. I can't remember. And she lived in London. So this was email communication, and that was very helpful. Like, she explained the whole grief stages, and like I know them, but still it was like very helpful to have her say, like, but this is how specifically each one meant for her, and it was very similar. So I felt like being able or having somebody that has gone through something and has come out the other side, that was helpful to talk to. Gratitude journal, and just like not pushing things. Like if I was in a place, I let myself be in that place, and then I moved to, like, like I didn't try to be like, don't cry, like you've cried enough, don't cry. No, cry, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that was very helpful. I know for the one that gave me my son, that pregnancy was very difficult in the sense, like mentally, because you're so scared and you don't want to say anything, you don't want to do anything. Like, while the first pregnancy you celebrated, like you had a baby shower, you met your friends, you spoke about it, hopes and dreams. But this last one, I don't even think I might have had one picture with me being pregnant with him. I didn't tell anybody until like well into my second trimester. I didn't even work as a dentist. I worked in a completely different field.
Like a field that doesn't matter to you,
where
you're like, I don't care, just be busy.
I just don't care. I need to, like, my mind needs to be busy. So it was very different. It was very lonely. So I feel like that's another thing that, like, I definitely want to say, like, like, you do feel, as it is, pregnancy is very lonely.
Yeah.
And then when you go through something like this, when you're so, like, cautiously happy about things, like, it gets even more lonelier. And unless like there's someone that like actually has gone through it or has had a baby or I feel like until you're not in that place, you can't really relate. So I had that with a lot of my friends with the first time around. Some of them were not even married. So they're like, oh, but it's okay. Like you can get pregnant again, or, like obviously they're doing the best that they can do. But that was really hard to kind of like, for me to like be like, okay, I don't want to talk to you. And I remember at the time I was like, I never want to be her friend, and I never want to talk to her, and I never want to do this, and it was just like there were just extremes, like which is not me. Like I just went through like all these extremes. But then, like after many months of reflection, I was like, okay, no, like,
it's not their fault. It's
not their fault. Yeah, they're not going to get it.
They're trying to be positive and like see the good things in that.
Exactly.
Because obviously you're not in that space. Like when you're angry anyway, like who wants to hear like, well, there's no reason to be angry. It's like the worst that you can say to anyone.
Yeah, it's like, like, oh, or even like someone telling you like, oh, but you should be so proud of your body. It's like, no, screw my body. Like, what? You can't do the most basic thing. So it was just like, what I wanted to hear is the only thing. Those were my friends. Like if they knew what I wanted to hear, then you're my friend. So luckily, I was able to keep all of them. Everyone understood, but yeah, it's hard. But it was quite a journey. For like in the last those 4 years up until I delivered, and I felt like those 4 years, it was like that was my tunnel vision. That was everything. So then after I had the baby, I was just like, okay. Now I have to pick up the pieces of my life and put them together. Like, okay, like what is my career status at this point? Like, now I can hope and dream. Like, what are those hopes and dreams? Like, it was just like, like they say, like when your baby's born, like a mother is born. But I felt like a whole new person was born.
Yeah.
Like me. Like I was like a whole new person. I was like, hey, like now what?
Yeah.
Because my entire life has been just about having a baby. Or at least I felt like at least the last 4 years have been that. So now what?
But then you were busy bringing up that baby, so it's not like where's your career at? So.
But it was just the whole thing of like, oh my God, where did my 30s go?
Yeah.
Like, what did I do? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did this. Like this long process, I did this.
It's a single-minded, I mean, your relationship survived it, which is, I think, beautiful.
Yes. That was definitely one of the things that my pen pal, I guess, my email pal from the UK had said, like, you know, like, that is definitely a relationship you should, like, work on after something, like, major, something like this happens, because you, like, as women, sometimes we get lost in just that, like, you know, like, tunnel vision, like, I just, you know, that's it. I want to get pregnant. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything else. And, like, you know, like, men, they grieve differently.
For them, it's also not the physical grief, like, it's all in the head then, like, like, it's a different feeling if you grieve mentally and something's missing, like, physically, it's like you're missing a limb.
Exactly. Yeah. It's different. And I felt like expecting each other to be that kind of shoulder every single time is not feasible. Like, you know, like, luckily I had a very loving, like, supportive friends, but, you know, my husband's like, he's not one to talk about this with everyone. So, but luckily he did have 1-2 friends that he was able to share. So I thought that the difference in grief was, like, there, like, all the things that I did or was able to do and even talk about to this day, like, even till this day, he won't be able to talk about it. Like, to the extent that I'm talking about it right now, like, he won't be able to do it. So it is different. And I felt like, for me also having that separate outlet, whether it was, like, friends, whether it was, like, that email pal, which was really helpful, the gratitude journal, like, daily reminder of, like, no, I'm on earth, like, and I'm very, like, grateful for all these things and this kind of thing. So, and a lot of friends, watching a lot of friends.
Watching a lot of Friends, yeah.
It's a great
Friends
show.
is always a solution.
Such a great show.
Yeah.
But that got through a lot, especially the late nights. The nights are hard. So it was like Friends on repeat. I guess slept to Friends, I want to say.
Yeah. But now
Literally.
can you watch it?
And now I can't watch it.
No, of course not.
Like, it's not like I have any sort of, like, negative connotation towards it. It's just like I'm just done. I, like, can't watch that show anymore. Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing this.
Of course.
I think this is your hot water has become cold. Yeah, I think what's important is that you came out and there's hope, like, that you have, like, there's more chances to have more babies, and that it also doesn't eat you up.
Yes.
Like, where did your 30s go is an important question. But
Yeah.
you can still, I mean, now I think anyway, like, we all are growing older, much healthier, so what does it matter? It's not like...
Yes, I mean, obviously you think retrospectively, like, this was your journey.
Yeah, this is what you had to be going through.
Yes.
Yeah, and other people go through a career which they then throw away at the age of 40, and you're like, why did you just work 100 hours a week in your 30s for no point at all? So everybody has their journey that they're going through.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and yeah.
So thank you, Annie, for coming to this podcast and sharing your story. And I hope it helps other women. And yeah, if you feel depressed or you have a certain medical history that makes you feel anxious, definitely seek medical help. Don't, like, just Google stuff. Please speak to a medical professional. But if you want to know more about what we've talked about, we're leaving some little notes in the show notes. And of course, you can share feedback and email us. And if you have a similar story that you'd like to share, and want to come on this podcast, or have somebody that you think should be telling their story, please, you can also email us. This podcast has been produced by Harkat Studios, and you can email us to 9+9, that is 9 as a number, at harkat.in. And yeah, thank you so much to Rani for coming.
Of course.
And yeah, bye.
Like, body, you knew this.